And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, could I remove these asbestos tiles myself if I just hold my breath for a few minutes? And with Dancing with the Stars now moving from ABC to Disney Plus, will I still be able to see plenty of salacious dance moves and crotch grabs? And now, the podcast host whose innovative dance moves are inspired by that rabid piga trapped in his pants, Pete Dominic!
Wow, that is some way to start the show, Pete, and the week as well. I don't want to brag, but I can dance. I'm not sure if it's quite why you say, but no, I did my share of breakdancing. I think that was my first public performance, as a matter of fact, in the middle of the high school, or I should say elementary gymnasium during a roller skating party in parachute pants and a members-only jacket. We tore it up. And as I looked around the gym and saw all my friends cheering me and a couple of others on, I realized, yeah, I can do this for a living. Which is why, folks, I'm here to tell you I have decided to become a professional breakdancer. I don't know, I'm sorry. Okay, folks, hi, hello, thank you very much for joining me. I have an awesome show for you today. Insana of CNBC joins me to talk about all things economics and finance. It is Monday, so I reached out to my friend Maura Quint. We talked about bullying and parenting and politics. Always great with Maura to start off the week. And I'm very happy to have you joining me. Also, I've got a sponsor this week. You'll hear me talking about Indeed.com. And I've got a great week of guests planned for you. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. I hope you got out and did some things you enjoyed doing. Ate some things you enjoy eating. Maybe you drank a little thing that you enjoy drinking. And most importantly, spent time with people that you love being with. I certainly did, and got to relax a little bit for like an hour and a half. But I did get a lot done around the house. I've got my seeds started. They're like 6 weeks in. My tomato and basil and beans and cucumber. I shared pictures of them on social media yesterday. Spring has sprung. It's underway. It'll be warm and sunny before you know it. And if you're not growing anything, then I highly recommend it. It's just one of many ways, things that you can do that just can make you feel good to see that plant coming up and to kind of take care of it. I get it's not for everybody. A lot of you think you can't grow anything, but you can. And your pal Pete is here to tell you to try again. I mean, I only started doing this a few years ago, so I still don't know what I'm doing. It's not that hard. Get a rack, get some lights, get some seeds and some dirt. Thank me later. Somebody right now going, that's my worst nightmare. I have no interest in doing that. All right. I'm sorry for pushing my hobbies on you. You don't come to my house and force me to play cards and Dungeons and Dragons or whatever you do that I probably wouldn't want to. But I'll never say a complete no to anything other than noodling. I don't want to go noodling with you in a weird southern swamp and put my arm down a catfish's mouth. No, you keep that passion for yourself. Does anybody in my listening audience actually go noodling? All right, let's get to the news, shall we? Still taking suggestions, recommendations on a little jingle into how I should get into the last 24, which is, of course, everything that happened in yesterday's news today. Of course, covering the weekend. And David Quartel emails me and says, try this. When you need the news and a little more, it's time to deliver the last 24. All right, not bad. Thank you, David. Keep it coming. Let's start on Friday, shall we, where Joe Biden introduced the newly confirmed first black female justice, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, to the country in, I believe it was a Rose Garden ceremony. And I got two clips from the newest Associate Justice for you. And this first one I heard on many, I think all of the Sunday shows. I listened to all of them while I'm outside fiddling around. But it's, if you haven't heard it, it's worth hearing. And if you have heard it, I think it's worth hearing again or a few times.
15 prior appointments for a black woman to be selected to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. But we've made it. We've made it, all of us, all of us.
Very emotional moment there, and this one as well I thought was excellent.
To be sure, I have worked hard to get to this point in my career, and I have now achieved something far beyond anything my grandparents could have possibly ever imagined. But no one does this on their own. The path was cleared for me so that I might rise to this occasion. And in the poetic words of Dr. Maya Angelou, I do so now while bringing the gifts my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave.
Wow. Yeah. Never go wrong with a Maya Angelou quote, especially in that circumstance on that very special day. All right, that was Friday. We heard from the president, the vice president, and many more as well. But for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. I thought this was actually pretty good, because Jen Psaki, I thought she just did a good job articulating the mood, the feeling in the White House around this beautiful day, as well as made it clear not every day is a good day. There's a lot of bad moments, and so you got to try to roll with it and hold on to the joy.
I'm going to try not to ugly cry about this day, which we were all doing on the South Lawn. Look, I was with the president before he went out. I was there on time. I didn't run out, as you would have seen. I was with him before when he was doing his final review of his remarks, and what he was reflecting on is, and you saw some of this in his speech, were the number of people, whether it is people who work at the White House, people who are part of his everyday, stewards or others who have commented to him how significant this moment is, and how, in a place where you are just trying to make it through every day, and every day is history in many ways. History can be heartbreaking, and many days it has been. History can be exhausting, and many days it has been. And history can be joyful. And today was a joyful day in history, and that is certainly how the president was. You saw his granddaughter, Naomi, who he talked about in the speech, come out. She was there also for a brief greet with Justice Jackson beforehand, and he made an effort to also introduce the new Associate Justice to some members of his close staff who just were inspired by the significance of today as well. So I would say there was a deep recognition of this moment of history, a joy in reaching it. And I think we've all been saying to each other in the hallways, no one can steal our sunshine today, because that's how everybody is feeling.
All right, there you go. And much more to talk about and see remaining on Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. That was a wonderful moment on Friday, and so I wanted to relive and share a little bit of that with you for those that missed it. I did. I was checked out on Friday afternoon. I had all the screens off. I was trying to be outside and be present. I didn't even know that the ceremony was happening, but I caught up with it over the weekend and wanted to share some of those joyous moments with you. Now let's head to something much less joyous. It is COVID, and I've got a couple clips. First, sorry, Smart Cousin Darcy, it's Dr. Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner. He was on CBS's Face the Nation. He says about only 1 in 7 new COVID-19 infections are reflected in public health data, due in part to at-home testing. 600 Americans are still dying each day, apparently. So it is far from over. A new variant starting to spread. Here is the former FDA commissioner.
The numbers, compared to where we were, obviously this is a dramatic improvement, but still 600 deaths a day. Here in the East Coast, we've had so many high-profile infections, the Attorney General, the Speaker of the House, the CIA Director, the Commerce Secretary. How do you characterize where we are right now?
Well, look, cases around the country are coming down. We have about 9 cases per 100,000 people per day, so prevalence is low. There's no question that we're experiencing an outbreak here in the Northeast, also the Mid-Atlantic, parts of Florida as well, which tends to track the Northeast. It's driven largely by B2, and I think that we're dramatically undercounting cases. We're probably only picking up 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 infections. So when we say there's 30,000 infections a day, there's probably closer to 250,000 infections a day, and they're concentrated in the Northeast right now, and that's because a lot of people are testing at home. They're not presenting for definitive negative PCR tests, so they're not getting counted. So when you look at the Northeast, for example, cases are up 89% over the last 14 days in Washington, D.C. They're up 58% in New York City, up 65% in New Jersey. So cases up in the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic are going up, but the rest of the country looks pretty good right now. And I think the net trajectory is that we're likely to get through this B2 wave. It's likely to be regionalized. I don't think it's going to become a nationalized epidemic of B2. And as we get further into the spring, we're likely to see these case counts come down, even here in the Northeast.
Well, he and many others have been wrong before, but I certainly hope he's right about that. And the same for what Dr. Fauci has to say to Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week yesterday.
Let me ask you about the spike we've seen right here in Washington. You and I were both at the Gridiron dinner. This is a dinner that had about 600 or so attendees. So far, I believe we're at 67 people that have tested positive who were at the dinner. I'm told, at least so far, no indication of anybody seriously ill, but you know, about 10% of those infected. What is the lesson here? Should we not be holding events like this, or to the point we just talked about, is it time to accept that we can have an event like this, but there's going to be a risk? Some people will test positive. If everybody's vaccinated, you know, it won't necessarily be that serious.
I think it gets back to what we were discussing just a moment ago, John. It's going to be a person's decision about the individual risk they're going to take. Mm-hmm. I think the people who run functions, who run big dinners, who run functions like the White House Correspondents' Ball, or thinking back the Gridiron dinner, are going to have to make a determination looking at the CDC guidelines and seeing where the trends are. I mean, there are some places you go, not only is it required that you show proof of vaccination, but you have to have a negative test the day you go to a particular place. Yep. And I know a lot of social functions throughout Washington and in New York are doing the same thing. And it's up to the individual to determine what their level of risk. We don't want to poo-poo getting infected. I think people sometimes say, well, it's okay to get infected. No, it's not, because there are things like long COVID, and there are sometimes people, even though they don't require hospitalization, John, they get significantly ill. They may be at home, they may require a doctor consultation, but they don't get hospitalized. That's not something to poo-poo. Again, sure, each individual will have to take their own determination of risk.
That's not something to poo-poo. I mean, I don't know. Got to be a better phrase or a word for Dr. Anthony Fauci to use than poo-poo. But yeah, get the point. Take the point, Fauci. The Washington Post headline, how fast Omicron's BA2 variant is spreading around the world. At the Washington Post, they write, the impact of BA2 subvariant is unclear. An uptick in coronavirus cases in the United Kingdom and parts of Europe is attributed to the new version of the virus. Some experts say a new wave could hit the United States amid relaxed safety protocols in the same way that Delta hit last summer when many thought the coronavirus was finished. Evidence is not clear on whether BA2 causes more severe disease, but vaccine makers have said the protection extends to BA2. Experts have said they believe infection from Omicron provides some level of immunity against BA2. So a lot more at the Washington Post, and that's what I've got for you on COVID. Now let's get to day, 46 or 47 of Vladimir Putin and Russia's an awful, horrible, some now saying genocidal, certainly war crimes being committed, completely unnecessary loss of life on both sides, innocent civilians, soldiers on both sides. It's just an absolute travesty. But if you ask the Ukrainians in Kyiv, they say they have won the battle of Kyiv. They pushed the Russians out. They don't expect them to stay out or not try again. And what they're asking for is weapons, weapons, weapons. All kinds of Ukrainian representatives on the Sunday shows. Joe Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, was just about everywhere as well. Here he is with Jake Tapper on CNN responding to the news that reports of Russian President Vladimir Putin appointed a new general to direct the war in Ukraine as his military shifts its strategies.
CNN has learned that Putin has appointed a new military commander to oversee this Russian attack and invasion on Ukraine, General Alexander Dvornikov. Dvornikov is known for his brutality when he led Russia's intervention in Syria. What does his appointment tell you about Putin's strategy moving forward?
Well, first, no appointment of any general can erase the fact that Russia has already faced a strategic failure in Ukraine. They thought that they were going to be able to conquer the capital city and take other major cities with little resistance, that they'd in fact be welcomed with open arms. And what we have learned in the first several weeks of this war is that Ukraine will never be subjugated to Russia. It doesn't matter which general President Putin tries to appoint. But as you noted, this particular general has a resume that includes brutality against civilians in other theaters in Syria, and we can expect more of the same in this theater. But it's not something that we need to anticipate looking forward. As you've noted, we've already seen it, and we can expect more of it. This general will just be another author of crimes and brutality against Ukrainian civilians. And the United States, as I said before, is determined to do all that we can to support the Ukrainians as they resist him and they resist the forces that he commands.
All right, there he is. And now here is more from President Biden's national security advisor and Woody from Toy Story, exact lookalike, Jake Sullivan, now talking on Meet the Press about sending MiGs, the airplanes, to Ukraine.
Are we now going to do what it takes to get them fighter jets, if that's something they need? I know that had been up in the air before. Is that changed?
So the only thing that the United States has expressed reservations about is sending fighter jets from a U.S. airbase in Germany into contested airspace over Ukraine, flying them from point A to point B. If a country in Eastern Europe wants to supply MiG-29s or other forms of Soviet aircraft, we have said that is their sovereign decision. The only thing we have said we would not do is make that transfer from Germany. From our perspective, though, the weapons that the Ukrainians are really focused on right now, that the chief of the Ukrainian armed forces walked through with us, are weapons that, if they're not in American stocks, and many of them aren't, we are working very hard to acquire them, source them from other countries, get them delivered and into the hands of Ukrainian fighters. That's an ongoing process day by day, and the whole of the U.S. government, under the direction of President Biden, is working overtime to make that happen as rapidly as possible, because we agree with the Ukrainian foreign minister. Time is of the essence, and we are in a race against time, and we intend to win that race.
Now let's hear from a Ukrainian. How about the mayor of Kyiv, Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, on ABC's This Week, telling Jonathan Karl that hundreds of Ukrainian civilians have been killed by Russian forces, quote, with no reason.
Both of you have seen with your own eyes the devastation that the Russians left behind as they retreated from the areas outside of Kyiv. The evidence of war crimes, I think, Mr. Mayor, you've called it genocide. What kind of justice do you want to see ultimately done for those who perpetrated, those who did the attacks, and those who ordered them?
Everybody was shocked. We was also shocked if we see not just images to be present in this in the town, Borodyanka, Gostomel, Bucha, where killed hundreds of civilians without no reasons. The women's, children, old people, teenager. It's genocide of Ukrainian.
Powerful stuff there from the mayor of Kyiv and former, is that the one that was the boxer? I think they're twins. Someone clear that up for me. And now to another powerful person. This is the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. Her name is Oksana Markarova, and she's always great. She was on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, and she said her country is preparing for a massive attack in the East.
There has already been 8 years of fighting in the East before this full-scale invasion. So when you are looking at the full force of the Russian military bearing down on this region, exactly what are you preparing for? What are you telling Ukrainians to prepare for?
Well, we've seen this, as you rightfully pointed. I mean, we have been saying for 8 years, and we've seen these atrocities, and we've seen these horrible attacks in the East, in Donetsk and Lugansk, when Russia occupied it illegally and attacked in 2014 and 2015. Right now, we see see that all these airstrikes that we see throughout Ukraine, we see in Mariupol, we see in Kharkiv, in Chernihiv, essentially destroying the cities from the air, but also the atrocities on the ground, which now every world sees after we were able to liberate north of Kiev. So what we are preparing is for the massive attack in the east. Yes, the enemy, Russians, they are demotivated, they are war criminals, but there are so many of them. And they still have so much equipment. And it looks like they're going to use all of it. So we are preparing for everything. We are preparing for securing the civilians. That's why the oblast announced that the safe evacuation of children and women. And we saw what happened in Kramatorsk when Russia attacked that very evacuation effort in order to get as many civilians out from where we expect the intensified attack to be. And, of course, our armed forces. I mean, the president, the commander-in-chief, and all the armed forces, they are preparing for whatever Russia is going to do in order to be able to defend us.
All right, man. I am so impressed with the Ukrainian leaders that we have heard from that obviously speak excellent English, and they also seem to be fearless. And that includes the woman we just heard from there, the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., Oksana Markarova. Good stuff. All right, now let me move on to some more miscellaneous clips from the weekend. I did want to play a Trump clip. Are you mad at me? Are you gonna turn the podcast off? Don't do it. It's not worth it. This is about a 27-second clip from Trump's rally in North Carolina over the weekend. Apparently his audiences are getting smaller and smaller, by the way. Some people think his power is waning, and he has made a bunch of risky endorsements, or just every endorsement's risky, including you heard him endorse Sarah Palin, who apparently doesn't have really much of a shot at that House seat in Alaska, but we'll see about that. He's obviously endorsed a high-profile former professional football player and man who seems to have had a head injury because he's really not sharp. It's Herschel Walker. You've heard that endorsement. And now the other kind of well-known person, because this is who they have to run. I mean, this is the winning formula, I guess, for a lot of Republicans. Just be famous. I mean, Democrats can be that as well. You're already famous and run for office. Obviously, we've seen that. But this is Dr. Oz, of course. He's running for Senate in Pennsylvania. And this was a very telling moment. A lot of people tweeted about this moment. This, again, 30 seconds, folks saying this incredible con man and imbecile was the president of the United States for 4 years. Here it is.
By the way, I endorsed another person today, Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania. Dr. Oz. Great guy, good man, Harvard educated, tremendous career, and they liked him for a long time. That's like a poll. You know, when you're in television for 18 years, that's like a poll. That means people like you, but he's a great guy.
All right, Dr. Oz gets the endorsement, and you think Trump's met him? Have they met? Or is he just out there and he's seen him on TV, probably? Anyway, one more clip from the rally. Don't worry, it's not Trump. This is a family being interviewed by one of those pro-Trump video guys there, and they ask the kid, who are you excited to see? And he accidentally says Joe Biden, or maybe not accidentally. Here it is.
Yes, sir.
I think they're more excited than we are. Are you excited?
Yes. Yeah. What are you excited for?
To see Joe Biden.
Trump.
Oops, the kid said the wrong. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe don't bring your kids to a Trump rally. That is wild. Who are these people? I got to get them on. I want to talk to them. I say. All right. What else do I have for you? Oh, how about this? The esteemed governor of Alabama. Her name is Kay Ivey, and she's got this new campaign ad out where she says that the election was stolen. So that's great.
The fake news, big tech, and blue state liberals stole the election from President Trump. But here in Alabama, we're making sure that never happens. We have not and will not send absentee ballots to everyone and their brother. We banned corrupt curbside voting, and our results will always be audited. I'm Kay Ivey. The left is probably offended. So be it. As long as I'm governor, we're going to protect your vote.
Wow, she really covered it all there, didn't she? Including we really are just doing this to upset the left point. She wants to make sure she virtue signals that as well, as the election was stolen, and then she's railing against absentee votes and curbside voting, neither of which there's an issue and you should do more of, and a number of states do a lot of without any problem, but I guess Alabama can't get that done. Anyway, wanted to share that awful ad of the governor of Alabama, Kay Ivey, with you. All right, after those last two clips, I think we need a laugh. Let's go to Saturday Night Live. I always love the weekend update. Colin Jost and Michael Che on the job. Let's take a laughter break.
Health officials in Washington, D.C. confirmed that a fox that bit a congressman near the Capitol had rabies. Officials suspect the fox contracted rabies when it was bitten by Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yes.
In a new interview, Donald Trump says that he wanted to join the January 6th march on the Capitol, but that the Secret Service wouldn't allow it. Also keeping him from storming the Capitol? Steps. Too many steps.
Senator Tom Cotton, who wants everyone to cool it with the long neck jokes, said he believes Supreme Court Justice Jackson would have defended the Nazis. Worse, he meant it as a compliment.
Senator Mitch McConnell, seen here watching the Oscars in memoriam package, reportedly said that his no vote on Ketanji Brown Jackson's Supreme Court nomination was not based on race or gender, but on Ketanji's refusal to answer his question, "Can I touch your hair?"
Oh, Michael Che. All right, there you go. There is your laughter break. And now it's time to get to the rest of the headlines I've got for you and what we lovingly refer to as the news dump. And Pete Code tells me tonight's news dump jingle is based on a family in Washington State dog who is recovering after they say it was attacked by an unknown large animal. Take it away, Pete.
Nano the dog attacked and bitten makes the owner jump. Maybe Wolverine or just Bigfoot on today's news dump.
Or just Bigfoot. Wow, I hope that dog is okay. And now to those headlines we go. Brought to you by Indeed.com. Well, let me start with this story because I'm not seeing it talked about or being reported nearly enough. And two of the men were accused of conspiring to kidnap the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, were acquitted on Friday by a federal jury, which was unable to reach a verdict on similar charges against two other defendants in the case. U.S. District Judge Robert Jonker declared a mistrial for Adam Fox and Barry Croft, while Daniel Harris and Brandon Caserta were found not guilty of kidnapping conspiracy. All four were facing up to life in prison if convicted. The verdict also seems to indicate that the jury agreed to at least some degree to the defense attorney's claims that the four men were entrapped by FBI agents. In response to the verdict, the governor's office decried the, quote, normalization of political violence, and I'm definitely going to get to the bottom of that. I want to talk to somebody about that. It's a huge issue if, in fact, the FBI did everything to give these guys what they needed to pull this off and then just arrested them. Important and interesting debate to be had about that kind of, quote, law enforcement or counterterrorism technique. I also feel personally like my newsfeed, I'm not seeing nearly enough about the fact that a private space capsule, SpaceX capsule, carrying three rich guys, billionaires, paying customers, and a former NASA astronaut just arrived at the International Space Station. They docked. They finished the first leg of this first-of-the-kind mission that will last about 10 days. Launched from Kennedy Space Center Friday morning, spent about 20 hours free-flying through orbit as they maneuvered closer to the space station. And the guys are an Israeli businessman, a Canadian investor, and an Ohio real estate guy that joined 7 other professional astronauts. And I talk about this with Maura Quint coming up. Now more than a dozen states are considering versions of Florida's Don't Say Gay bill that the governor of Florida signed last month. And I can't believe we're seeing this, but we're seeing this. Imitators in red states across the country, according to a report published Sunday. The law bans classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through 3rd grade. And just here's the thing. Where was this an issue? In what kindergarten through 3rd grade, what was happening? The parents were rejecting. Kids are going to see same-sex couples, and that's good. Their friends might have 2 moms or 2 dads. They might have a teacher that is gay. And that's good. It builds understanding, acceptance, and empathy. It helps fight ignorance so you understand what the hell's going on and you don't say something insensitive or mean or cruel. It builds acceptance. It's a wonderful thing. My daughter grew up from the day she was born. Our next door neighbor was a gay guy. He was our closest friend and hung out at our house all the time. We had keys to each other's apartments, and he babysat my daughter. And what of it? What happened? What happened to my daughter? Nothing. It was awesome for her. I'm just not following this, and if you have concerns about it, please help me understand. Bills with similar language have been proposed in Alabama, Arizona, Georgia, Iowa, Louisiana, South Carolina, Missouri, Indiana, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Ohio. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said a Florida-style education bill will be a top priority in the next legislative session. All right, I'm opinionating way too much in the news dump. I'm sorry. How about this? Just a few more headlines, quick ones. Pakistan has ousted their prime minister with a no confidence vote. Really important story there about Prime Minister Imran Khan potentially bringing a peaceful and orderly end to a political standoff that a lot of feared would result in his arrest or a military coup. So that's a very important story to follow in Pakistan. Centrist French President Emmanuel Macron and right-wing challenger Marine Le Pen are vying for the top spot in the first round of France's presidential election on Sunday. And from the New York Times, the week ahead section, the U.S. government will release its latest monthly inflation data on Tuesday. Experts expect prices to have climbed more than 8%. The NBA playoffs begin on Saturday. The Miami Heat and the Phoenix Suns are the top seeds. The Christian Holy Week begins today with Palm Sunday. Well, I should say yesterday it began. The Jewish holiday of Passover begins Friday night. And that's what's coming up this week, according to the New York Times. What's coming up this week for you? What are you up to, and thinking about? Well, that's all the news headlines I've got for you on today's news dump. Now it's time to get to my guests, but first, I do want to tell you about Indeed.com. Several listeners have told me they've used Indeed and had great success because if you're ready to take your business to the next level, Indeed makes it easy to hire and build a team with the right skills to make your dreams a reality. If you're hiring, you need Indeed because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And you guys, Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Did you hear me? You're going to find the right candidate. If you don't have to pay. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner that can help you do all of it, and that's Indeed.com. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. You can find great talent through time-saving tools like their Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews tools. And with Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of qualified candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. Shout out to Frank Zarinsky, who's a longtime listener, also the founder and CEO of Motion City Media, who used Indeed. He said, Indeed did it again. I just wrapped up an interview with a gentleman named Adam that came to us through a paid Indeed ad, and this guy is a total wow. He's going to be a perfect fit with Motion City Media. Kind, compassionate about film. We can't wait to begin working with him. All right, Frank, I'm glad to hear that, and I just want everybody else listening to know that if you want to start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/standup, go now, Indeed.com/standup. The offer is valid through April 30th. Go to Indeed.com/standup to claim your $75 credit before April 30th. Indeed.com/standup. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Nailed it. All right, coming up, my Monday conversation with Maura Quint. But first, I've got a conversation with Ron Insana of CNBC. He's an analyst and commentator there. You might have recognized him from watching CNBC. He's one of the good guys for sure in the world of finance and commentary in finance. He is one of the top 100 business news journalists of the 20th century, nominated for a news documentary Emmy for his role in NBC's coverage of 9/11. He's authored 4 books on Wall Street. He is a speaker all over the country, talks about domestic and global economics, financial markets, economic policy issues. He's well known also for his high-profile interviews. He's interviewed presidents and investors and scientists and world leaders. But for over 3 decades, he's been one of the most highly respected business journalists and money managers, and I'm glad to call him a friend. Ron is always great when he's on the show. We talked about the economy. We talked about the war. We talked about energy and more. He's on Twitter at Insana, Rinsana. I think you're going to like our conversation and learn a lot. I sure did. Here we go.
Better. Yeah, thanks. A lot better. Jesus, I had the flu for like a week and a half.
Oh, no.
Sucked. Yeah. I tested negative 3 times for COVID. And first 3 days, it was weird. This was totally backwards. The first 3 days that I had it, I was coughing so hard that my chest was killing me. Normally that comes at the end of it. This happened at the beginning of it. And by like a week and a half later, that part was fine. And then I just felt like shit for several days. So
that sucks. And it's like, you don't even get to say you had COVID. I mean, like,
no,
it doesn't.
I cannot say that.
At this point, you could get a flu or another virus that's like worse than COVID, but you don't get I feel like you don't get the sympathy.
No, it's like, really? You got the flu? Oh, that's too bad. Yeah.
Yeah. It's horrible. It's worse than
COVID. Did you
COVID.
get your flu shot? Well, yeah, I got my flu shot. Yeah. Of course I got my flu shot. Yeah. Got my flu shot. I got 2 COVIDs. I got a booster. I'm going for the booster 4 tomorrow, probably.
Oh, yeah?
Why not?
Yeah, no,
look, I'll keep taking them. Like, I don't know if I told you a story years ago. I had a cousin that I never knew because he died of polio, and he was one of the last kids in the U.S. to die of polio. My aunt was waiting apparently till school to get him the vaccine, and he passed that summer. So my older brother knew him, and it's like, stick me with everything. Yeah. I don't give a shit. I mean, also, I just turned 61. I'm not really worried about the long-term consequences of any vaccine. I'd rather not. One of my cousins, again, another cousin, passed away from COVID 2 months ago, unvaccinated, blue-collar conservative guy up from Buffalo, 63 years old, every comorbidity you could imagine, and 2 months on a ventilator. From the day he went in, he was on a ventilator for 2 months, and that was it. Didn't have to go, right? Didn't have to die. And so I don't care what they stick in me at this point. I just want to make it to 80 and see like a grandkid or two.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I thought that was the case, which is why I sent a team of people over to your place. Bring it in, folks. They're going to stick you with, there's a whole bunch of vaccines. There's a whole bunch of vaccines that are just in trial. You're going to get all those. And then there's one guy that just has a fork that hates you on CNBC.
There's more than one. There's absolutely more than one.
He's got an actual pitchfork, and he's going to hit you with that.
Some of them work there.
It doesn't get old hearing those stories. I'm glad that you talked about your cousin and everybody else, and your the one with polio as well. I mean, I think it's partly run because if you didn't live through it, or if enough time passes, you forget it and you relive it. And we could say that is true of so many things right now. What do you think of that theory?
Now, absolutely. I mean, I'm mired in the 1930s at the moment, worried about the distance between generations that have institutional memory and that don't. So we're looking at the largest land war in Europe since World War II. We've gone through a pandemic, something we've not gone through since 1918. Obviously, there were some difficult flu seasons back in 68 and 58, I believe it was. But yeah, I think, people, younger people in particular, who don't carry around maybe some of the institutional memory I had because my parents were World War II, Depression era folks. People forget that bad things happen. And we've been coasting along since really the 90s, maybe even the mid 80s, without, for all intents and purposes, without a care in the world. And this is what life has historically been like. And so I think that, it comes up, it slaps you in the face when you're least expecting it. And now we're staring at things that, certainly folks in my generation, tail end baby boomers, hope to never hear about again. And then everybody younger than us has not only no institutional memory, but no actual memory. Their schooling is a little different. And so there isn't this consciousness about what can really go wrong in the world at different times along the way.
So well said. And I don't know if you've noticed this. I forget how old your kids are. My daughters are 14 and 17, and they're telling me along these lines that tobacco smoking is kind of making a comeback. And it illustrates, I don't know how true that is, but if it's true, it kind of illustrates like what we went through. Certainly people around our age just kind of straddled that. Our parents smoked. We knew it was terribly bad. We lost a lot of people to it. The science came out, the controversy, the lies, all of it. Then the laws. And overnight, remember in New York when you stopped smelling like smoke?
And now you smell weed. So that's a whole other. that's a whole other different conversation.
Right, but clearly not as bad as tobacco smoke so far in terms of the addiction level and even the health issues. So it's like now if kids are going to start smoking, it just kind of illustrates why fascism is also making a return. By the way, Ron Insana, where are you on fascism? For, against? I don't like to make assumptions.
I am violently against fascism. Okay. And I don't want to be called Antifa because I don't think that is indicative of my views on fascism. So having grown up Sicilian American and having my forebears on the wrong side of this. And in fact, not only that, the Italians invented fascism. The Germans put the twist on it with Nazism. Look, again, and I think, to a certain extent, as was the case in prior periods, we're misidentifying certain problems. So fascism and Nazism, yes. Communism, socialism, don't really fall into this. It's what we're really worried about is totalitarian dictatorships.
Right.
Spreading throughout the world.
Yeah.
And you could assign any ism you want to them, but we're really talking about autocracies, right? We're not talking about economic systems. We're talking about political systems. And I think that, once again, memories are generational only. And you could talk to kids about Nazism. You could talk to them about my parents' experience, which does not resonate with my own kids, 24, 20, and 19. They understand it, but it's not like necessarily an ever-present threat in their mind. We grew up, my older brother, 66, is part of the duck and cover crowd, right? They were getting under desks in school. Yeah. We were still getting the civil defense stuff on TV every month, with the we didn't have the Conelrad station, but, you'd get that yellow thing on your TV screen. If this were a real emergency, you'd be notified where to tune. I have a memory of those things, and so seeing it rise up and bubble to the surface the way it has in the last several years is, I think, truly disturbing. And again, I think not enough people have a full awareness of the risks that exist when moments like this arise.
Well, you make a great point about just the difference between totalitarian autocracies and authoritarians and fascism and different economic systems. And one question I wanted to ask you and anybody in your world is, I get tired, Ron, exhausted with people arguing about these economic systems that have been tried and succeeded and failed in different ways, winners and losers, socialism, capitalism, communism, whatever ism you want to talk about. I get tired with the argument because what I see, and I don't know much, but you do, what I see is the internet and technology and cryptocurrency and a world where robots are going to take over. And I feel like we should be talking about a new future economy as opposed to some legacy economic doctrine or argument that we have. We're not going back to any of that. We have robots. I want to get a sex robot. That's what is that called?
How's your wife feel about that?
She's fun. She's ecstatic. She bought it for me.
Less work for mother, as they say.
That's actually my sex robot's name. That's so weird that you knew that. But that's the conversation that we should be having, the future economy. And we're going to conversations about UBI and the pros and cons of all that shit and self-driving cars. Like, why can't we argue about that?
Look, I don't know. And again, we fall back into these ridiculous arguments about socialism and communism. And first, just as a blanket statement, communism in the form in which it was originally envisioned by Karl Marx. Not that I'm a huge fan. I think he was a great social scientist. I think he was a horrible economist. But communism, where, each according to his own needs, each according to his own skills, blah, blah, blah. First of all, that's never been tried. Social democracy has been tried in Europe and has had various degrees of success, depending on which country you're in. Northern Europe has done reasonably well with it. Germany's done reasonably well with it. We have a social democracy for all intents and purposes because we do have at least a portion of our economy involved in entitlement programs and different forms of support. So we have a hybrid system. This is not pure free market capitalism. There are rules of the road. There is government intervention. So these, as you say, these conversations are nonsense. The conversation, as you very rightly put it, that we are not having is what does the future shape of this economy that we're now beginning to talk about really look like? How does it impact people's living standards, their way of doing business, their ability to get jobs that are productive and paying and meaningful, against the backdrop of rapid technological change.
And along those lines, what does the future of the labor movement hold? I really wanted to get your take on what we've seen. I talked with Stephen Greenhouse on the podcast this week, of course, economic reporter. He's covered the labor movement for decades. And the future of work. What role does the labor movement, do unions in America play? Because you mentioned, European economy, you analyze all this stuff all the time for a living. And, if you look at it just a little bit, I'll never forget Paul Ryan confirming this at a debate where the income inequality is far greater here in the U.S. than it is there. And social mobility is better in Europe. Paul Ryan said that about Europe. I'll never forget it. And a lot of people attribute that to organized labor. So what is the future of labor? What do you make of the union in Staten Island and Amazon? What are your thoughts?
So I think, and I like to go back to root causes. So I think that with the pandemic, we had a radical and profound shift in the psychology of Americans. We have now lost nearly 1 million people, right? Just from the pandemic alone.
Probably more. Those are conservative estimates, right? Yeah. That we know of. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So 3 million people retired early. 1 million women are still out of the labor force because the cost of childcare is prohibitive and they can't go back in. And so I think what happened with work from home and shelter in place is that people legitimately started asking fundamental questions. What do I want to do, first and foremost? What gives me satisfaction? What do I draw psychic benefit? How much do I want to do it for? And where do I want to do it? And that question now has led to a resurgence in the power of labor, particularly given we have 11.3 million open jobs in the United States and about 7.5 million unemployed individuals. So we are short almost 4 million humans when it comes to the job market itself. So labor, for the first time in, let's say, 40 years, is now gaining bargaining power over capital. And so I think, again, profound might be too strong a word because I don't think we're necessarily going back to the 70s where you had ironclad contracts and automatic inflation escalators and all those types of things. That may ultimately happen if inflation in particular, were to get out of control from here. I do think labor's share of profits and job security and other issues more recently associated with shareholder rights is going to flip in the other direction. And I think labor will benefit. Look, we're seeing it. I was just talking to a restaurant manager the other night. They're paying $16, $17 an hour for busboys. If somebody hears 18, they're gone. There's a Burger King that's paying $18 an hour to flip hamburgers. Yeah. So labor share is going to go up. And I think that will last for an extended period of time.
I wonder what I got to pay to, a young teenage, a strapping young buck to help me dig the 5 yards of mulch I'm going to get. I wonder that probably going to be around.
$20 an hour.
He's got to be very strapping. All right, sorry. I'm sorry. Listen.
That's right. You just went off on your own there. For a minute
I just got it all dreamy. So I wanted to ask you, you've written a lot about this, and I think this is a really interesting and important issue, is inflation and the price of things. Most people don't really understand traditional causes of inflation. And we really don't understand, I think, although it might be easier because it doesn't have all the economic jargon in it, what's going on with COVID. We understand that a little bit more, but you've looked at this. There's obviously a nuanced conversation. You can't put it on a bumper sticker, but prices for everything.
Exactly.
Everything seems to cost more. I can't get a new pool liner, Ron. So, my life is really, we might have to deal with a major issue here. But obviously everybody knows about gas. So what are the causes still of price increases?
So again, it goes back to the pandemic and now put the Ukraine war in this, where we have sanctions. Just here's a staggering statistic I saw yesterday morning. Last year, Ukraine exported 43 million tons of grain from July to February. When the war started, since the war started in Ukraine, they've exported 1 million tons against expectations of 65 million tons being shipped this year. The stuff is literally just piling up. Now, you take the pandemic and you take Shanghai closing down because of China's zero COVID policy,
which is recent.
Shenzhen closing down, Hong Kong in trouble. We have the biggest supply chain disruptions I've seen in my lifetime, where you cannot get computer chips, you cannot get potato chips, you can't get a car for 8 months. And if you do, it's 10 to 12% above sticker. Or in your case, a pool lining. In my case, the guy who does my pool doesn't have any employees anymore, right? So He'll come in May to open it up, but he comes by himself as of last summer, entirely on his own to do the pool work. Look, first world problems, I grant you, but still, it's very difficult to find labor, and it's difficult to find the inputs that we need to make stuff, whether it's food, whether it's cars, whether it's computer chips, whatever it is. This has all been disrupted by a pandemic that is still raging in certain parts of the world and exacerbated by a war that's disrupting energy and food supplies. That, to me, is not the type of inflation necessarily that we're accustomed to dealing with. And it's also the type of inflation that raising interest rates by the Federal Reserve won't necessarily cure. By the way, just to put another element to this, we are short 5.8 million homes in the United States relative to current demand. So what the Fed will likely do, and I hate to say this, is they're going to engineer what they hope to be is either a soft landing or a mild recession to wring inflation out of the system. And we're just going to have to eat it for a couple of quarters so that prices come down.
How sure are you of that?
Not very. And look, there have been only 3 soft landings since the 1980s. The one that I remember most clearly was 94, 95, which really, while the Fed was raising rates, we had the Mexican peso crisis and the bankruptcy of Orange County, California, relatively small events on the global stage. Given that inflation is a global problem, given that central banks around the world are raising rates, given that the Fed is indicating to us now it's going to get much more aggressive, probably a half-point hike this month and next. Getting into the weeds here a little bit, they're going to reduce the size of their $9 trillion balance sheet very quickly. That is also a credit tightening measure that could push rates up higher still. I worry they'll tip us into a recession sooner than most people would guess. Some are saying 2023. I would bet third or fourth quarter of this year.
And that's all led to, and you've been talking about stock market turning into a bear market. Is that what's?
I think so. I mean, and garden variety, I don't think there's as much, let's say, leverage or excess borrowing in the system like we had in 2006-07 that led to the great financial crisis in 2008. I don't see this enormous pocket of speculation in residential real estate. Prices are up, but supply is down. So that makes sense to me. I don't see the banking system at risk. Household balance sheets, pretty clean, $2.5 trillion of excess savings. Corporate balance sheets, pretty clean. So we just might get a garden variety recession and a garden variety bear market, which is a 15 to 20% pullback in stocks. And I think in this case, it's as much about time as price. It's not necessarily going to be catastrophic. If, however, there's some pocket of leverage out there, a lot of borrowed money in some asset class that we simply can't see, and the Fed raises rates, we'll have a bigger problem. I just currently don't see that and haven't been able to identify it.
By the way, I should mention Ron's great gardening book, Garden Variety, has nothing to do with financial anything. It's just Ron in an apron.
In my shorts in the backyard, putting tulips
tomatoes, just tomatoes is what I had. You mentioned the housing market. I want to ask you real quickly. I keep reading about and hearing about private equity's role in buying up homes and huge amounts of houses, and even individual investors buying some guy. If I read this right, some one person owned 30,000 homes or something. How big of a deal is that? Is that something that we overplay it? Is that in every market? Because, and I don't even really understand it. Just it shouldn't sound like it shouldn't be legal to me. But.
Well, so I suspect your opinion would have been different in late 2008, early 2009, when we had a glut of homes, and some homes were going in, let's say, Henderson, Nevada, or even in Miami, Florida, for 25 to 30 cents on the dollar, having had a housing boom that was unlike any other we've seen. And private equity investors came in and bought up that excess supply on the cheap with the intention of turning it into rental units, whether they were single family homes or condominiums. I am worried that one of the major constraints on supply is private equity ownership. And if they were to turn that loose and begin to sell rather than rent those properties, prices would come down. Again, we're literally physically short units. And so you can't build a house that fast, right? It's 18 months at best. You're going to get something start to finish, unless you're a big developer and you're knocking out neighborhoods, in serial fashion. Some of that supply needs to be turned loose. It can't be illegal. I mean, property ownership in the United States doesn't have too many constraints on it. I do think it has had an impact on pricing and supply that right now is acute. and is problematic for the housing market.
You've written a lot about and covered energy markets forever, and you've re-upped an article. I love when people do this because it's like, look, I wrote this in 2014. It's still applicable. What's changed? And obviously this relates to the price of oil and OPEC. And you've got another piece recently about Russia's Ukraine invasion. And there's a lot to talk about that you can speak to on this. But let's just start with, I mean, people, again, were confused. Is the price of oil gone up because of COVID and supply chain and oil barges are stuck off the coast of California? Or is it because of Putin's invasion into Ukraine and everything surrounding that? Or, of course, is it probably somewhere in the middle and they're all tied together because oil's oil on the market?
Right. I mean, the answer is just yes, right? I mean, so at one point, if you remember in 2020, I guess, price of oil futures contract went to minus $37 a barrel, went negative. Never happened before in history, right? Demand collapsed. Air passenger traffic in April of 2020 was down 97%. So no planes were flying. We weren't driving to work. Actually, CO2 emissions in, I think, in the second half of 2020 were down 25%, right? So demand for energy products around the world at the very depths of COVID went almost to zero. Then all of a sudden, we stimulated the economy. We gave people a lot of money. We kind of came back online. So the demand for energy products went up, but the supply was still constrained because production, particularly in the United States, had come down. And that wasn't a function of the pandemic. That was a function of Russia and Saudi Arabia, starting in 2015, which you referenced in my piece, deciding to flood the market with oil globally and drive U.S. frackers out of business and make it uneconomic for them to continue producing at the levels that we saw. In 2020, early 2020, we were the largest producer of oil in the world. We were doing 13 million barrels a day. They drove these frackers out of business into bankruptcy. Trump administration did absolutely nothing about it because obviously the price of gasoline came down to $1 a gallon. And so nobody really cared. And then as demand picked up, you don't just go back out into the Permian or any of these other, fracking sites and turn the spigot on and have oil go on. Too much volatility in prices. They decide not to produce, right? And so then all of a sudden, Russia and Saudi Arabia are reclaiming market share and taking control of the oil market back from us. Then we get the war. And then Russia's the largest exporter, third largest producer, and oil spikes to $130. It's down to 97 now, but it's still, it's still pricier than we want it to be. And we could have solved this problem. Now and I don't mean to go on, Pete, I'm sorry, but I'll to put a finer point on it. I argued in 2014, we should have subsidized the fracking industry. Again, I'm concerned about climate. I'm concerned about all those things. I wanted to drive Russia and Saudi Arabia out of the oil markets and let us take control, because once we start producing natural gas in serious volumes, we can be that supplier to the rest of the world and tip the balance, geopolitical and energy balance. So it's both an energy security and national security issue. And we dropped the ball. We didn't do what we should have done to support the industry and ensure independence.
Got to let my dog in while you answer this. While you answer this question, because you have another great piece at CNBC. Everybody should be reading Ron over there. He's always writing really interesting, important pieces about how energy prices might be soaring, but the Keystone Pipeline wouldn't have helped ease the pressure. Explain kind of how oil markets work and how, by the way, there's like thousands and thousands of permits that oil companies have that they're not even pumping in right now. So it's just a talking point. It really, I mean, anybody who's been arguing in good faith and knows anything about energy economics, much less economics, knows that this is all BS Republican talking points as far as I can tell.
Well, so there are 9,000 approved federal permits that private companies have not yet acted upon to further drill for oil and natural gas in various parts of the country, not on federal land. And people bitch about that all the time. Well, why don't we open federal lands to drilling? We don't need to. There are 9,000 unused federally approved permits for additional drilling. The Keystone Pipeline is not a production entity. It is a distribution pipeline from Canada. It takes some of the danger out of transporting Canadian crude oil via rail, which is more expensive and to an extent more dangerous, and would streamline the process of delivering Canadian energy products to the United States. It would have created, I believe it was 11,000 jobs, and would deliver 800,000 barrels of Canadian oil a day, which we are already getting. It's not that we're not getting Canadian crude. When you look at the U.S. energy consumption at 19 million barrels a day, U.S. production is now approaching 12 million barrels. Between Mexico and Canada, we get virtually all the rest, except for a little from Saudi Arabia, and then some really heavy crude from Russia, which we're no longer taking, which we use to clean refinery operations. It's more like a cleansing oil than it is something that we use for consumption. So we are effectively energy independent in North America. The Keystone Pipeline is a delivery system. It doesn't add to production. It would just reroute the oil that we already get from Canada. So it's a ridiculous argument.
What do you think? I love talking to you because I can just ask you anything, and you have so many actual, real, factual-based, data-based information, Ron. This might be, what do you think of Elon Musk in general as a person?
So the same way I would imagine that people thought of Thomas Edison or Alexander Graham Bell or John Rockefeller or any other industrialist who had personality quirks that make them who they are. Mm-hmm. Like, do I dig what he does on a daily basis? Not really. By the same token, he's the only guy that's made an electric vehicle and that he's selling in the hundreds of thousands. Granted, he's gotten government support to do it. He's done SpaceX. He's done the Boring Company. I mean, look, the guy is a genius, for Christ's sakes. I mean, it's not like he's crazy and not accomplishing anything. None of these guys, you go back to Edison. Edison was supposed to be a very difficult human to deal with, right? John D. Rockefeller had his own characteristics. Carnegie, Stephen Jay Gould, all these different guys who were involved in the development of the early American economy had their own personality quirks, right? And I think, look, Steve Jobs, who I interacted with mostly electronically, never met him in person, but he was not an easy character to get along with from everything that I know about him, and even from my own satellite interactions with him. Not the cheeriest guy on the planet, God rest his soul. We did have occasional nice conversations. Geniuses are geniuses. They're not supposed to be normal. I don't love what he does with stock manipulation. I think sometimes Elon, with this libertarian bent that he has, really tries to mess with the government, mess with the SEC, literally, and pardon me for saying this, just for shits and giggles, right? I think he does it for that reason alone, just to poke the bear in the eye. But aside from that, there is no doubt that he's one of our, Thomas Edison's. He's one of our, lead guys at the forefront of technological advancement.
I don't know. I always want to ask people like you. Some people say that he's this guy who's very intelligent at finding smart ideas and buying them. Like he doesn't.
Edison.
Is that right?
Yeah. Edison didn't invent some of the things. He standardized the cinema business, right? And the way in which film cameras were used. He didn't invent it, right? And it was a German invention, really. And you could say that about a lot of people. You could say it about Bill Gates. Bill Gates bought the operating system off IBM, which never believed that personal computers would take off, and he did. So, he and his early partners went off and did something that wasn't necessarily technology that they developed, but that they acquired and made better, and then allowed for mass production of personal computers.
People are complicated, I think.
Look, we all are. None of us will ever, would we ever, Musk puts himself out there and you see all his quirks. He's getting high on a podcast. He's doing this. He's doing that. He's got his personal relationships for all to see. Look, we all have that stuff going on. We just don't broadcast it. At least I don't, No, and not that my life's that weird, but, I'm also not a genius and I don't get the special genius exemption for being so far above everyone else intellectually that I, like Einstein, I get to kind of do what I want,
Well, you're being modest, and I love talking to you. Let me just ask you one final question, just about how the world order, or the global economy, seems to have been shaken up. That's the other big question that everybody in your world and a lot of different worlds are trying to figure out what direction, what trajectory this new world order, which, by the way, those three words in conspiracy circles are just nuts. But I guess I don't.
Yes, the QAnon folks go crazy.
It's just outside of them, I kind of want to say to somebody like, well, we're talking about the way that the world works with each other. We're talking about the global economy. And you make a really good point, a historical point, one of your pieces at CNBC about after World War II, we tried to create, a new economy where countries would work together and not be so isolated as to prevent future violent, horrible conflict. Yeah. And one might argue that it worked as well as you could ever imagine, maybe even better for a long time. And we can talk about all the problems that have happened. But do you see things being shaken up in a surprising way as a result of Russia's invasion into Ukraine and how China, the U.S., Europe, and the rest of Asia react to it?
Yeah, I mean, this is my idea, and I think it's safe to say we're probably in a new Cold War of sorts. I mean, certainly with Russia, we're risking an actual physical war. And with China, which has aspirations to overtake the U.S. economy and become the regional power in Asia, there is a reordering of the power structure in the world. And listen, to give Joe Biden some credit, I mean, he has pulled together and reconstituted the alliance, NATO, European Union, the United States, Australia, Japan, South Korea, pulled all these folks together in harmony in order to at least, do what we didn't do in the 30s, which was to, and it's hard to compare Putin to Hitler, and I hate those comparisons broadly speaking. But had we stopped Hitler in, let's say, not 23, because no one knew about him, but in 33, when he was more of a known entity, a lot of this wouldn't have happened. We know now that Putin has probably designs on countries beyond Ukraine. So, yes, there is a new world order in the sense that the West probably needs to tighten its relationships. We have to be more conscious of cyber risk from Russia and China. We have to be more conscious of military risk and economic risk. And I do fear that we're going to break back into regional or hemispheric trading zones where if China does take Taiwan, for instance, or try to, we will impose the same type of sanctions on China as we have on Russia. That's a much bigger deal economically.
Right.
Russia's economy is the size of New York State. It's the 11th largest in the world. If they didn't have oil and nuclear weapons, we wouldn't even pick up the phone. Right. I mean, we wouldn't even talk to them.
But China, like everything in my studio and on my body, is from there.
Yes, including whatever you're trimming your beard with. Is
How
probably made
dare you, sir? I only use American-made razors.
Yeah, Harry's, right? So, look, if we end up having an economic war with China, it'll be significant and serious, and it's either a deep recession or the potential for a depression. So, yeah, look, I'm really concerned about the splintering of alliances and the rise of, these totalitarian dictatorships. President Xi will become Xi for life, president for life come the fall. Does he really have designs on Taiwan or?
Yeah. I mean, that's the most important question, it would seem, in the world. Does he have designs on Taiwan? But what about the one thing I want to ask about China, and then I'll let you go, is I often hear that people overplay the strength of China's economy for one simple reason, and nothing is simple, so I'm sure you're going to tell me this is stupid, but that they're not having enough babies. And demographics matter, and population matters. And China has a real situation with the fact that they don't have enough people being born to support the folks that that's a kind of basic economics 101. If you're not going to bring in immigrants, you're not going to replace so to support the future. I mean, is that where do you come down on that?
It's a major problem for China. It's a major problem for Japan. It's a major problem for parts of Europe.
Yeah,
and
Italy.
More recently, believe it or not, it is a problem for us. Last year, the United States population grew at the slowest pace in the history of the country. We have constrictive immigration policies, which are just beginning to get rolled back. We have a baby bust among millennials who, because of the great financial crisis, delayed family formation, delayed it again during the pandemic. So we're not just now going out to buy houses, one of the reasons why demand for housing is so great. And we have the 1.7 children per woman being born in the United States, which is below the population replacement rate. So I get when I'm out speaking publicly and I hint at an open borders philosophy, again, we're missing 4 million people in the labor force. We had a baby bust. Our population's not growing. It's the same problem that China has. China has other internal economic problems, which leads me to believe it's not the monolithic challenge that many people would suggest. They have a debt to GDP ratio of 300%. They have internal problems that are economic in nature. Again, they have too few working age males because of the one-child policy. They tried two-child policy. They've tried three-child policy. And people are refusing to have babies in China because it's too expensive to have even one. So, yes, they have a huge problem. Japan is probably going into irreversible population decline. But if we're stupid enough to go down this road,
but the answer,
and not open. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go
well,
ahead.
I was just going to say, I think you're about to say it. The easy solution to that is we don't have too few humans on planet Earth.
No.
And we don't have, you could argue in certain ways, we have enough food to feed what we do have. We have a distribution issues is what we have.
Correct.
For resources, we have distribution issues. And then obviously the threat of climate change and so on. But more specifically, if that wasn't the case, the bottom line is there are people that would be happy to come into any of these countries and work and support, right? It's an immigration solution, is it not?
Yeah, listen, I don't know if you want to go to China. I mean, in what I would describe as the Orwellian surveillance state in the making.
Fair enough. I was thinking about
come here.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure. And why we're making this so difficult, why we can't engage in comprehensive immigration reform, why we don't make it easier now that we are short people, like a lot of other countries on the planet, short workers. If you want to reduce wages, flood the labor pool. Obviously you talked about robots. We're going to see a lot of automation. We're going to see a lot of productivity enhancing software. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen like the Taco Bell drive-throughs that they're now starting to build, where the restaurant itself is elevated, and there are 3 drive-through lanes. Now Chipotle's doing this, McDonald's doing this. You're going to get your burrito supreme through pneumatic tube, and you're going to drive off to reduce the amount of labor that's required in quick service restaurants. Amazon will have robots that can load 800 boxes on a conveyor belt per hour. So we'll have automation, but we need more people, and it's inarguable. Labor force growth plus productivity growth equals economic growth. If you don't have it, you don't have it. We don't want to be China. We don't want to be Japan. And sadly, President Biden just rolled back these Rule 42 issues around immigration, and everybody's losing their mind. But we need low-skilled, medium-skilled, and high-skilled workers right now. So we can't wait for kids to be born and enter the labor force 22 years from now. We need them today.
And almost every single special interest and business interest and even religious institution supports that notion. It is simply a political party that demonizes these people and is xenophobic. And it's not obviously only in America, this European issue, as we've seen.
And look, I mean, so, I was arguing with somebody on Twitter the other day, right, about open borders and stuff. I said, look, my grandparents came over. Yeah, they signed in. They didn't send advance word to the United States in 1912 that they were on their way from Italy, right? No, they didn't give anybody fair warning that they were coming.
It is me, Giuseppe Insana. I will arrive soon, someday.
Yeah, Angelo Pilato did not send a note except to maybe some relative he had in Buffalo or Cleveland or wherever the hell, he knew somebody. And nor did my grandma, anybody on Sam Insana didn't do it, and my grandmother didn't do it. My other grandmother didn't do it. And so this notion that at some point, it was always legal immigration, and we always followed these strict protocols. We've had exclusion periods. We've had periods where we've let everybody in. It's a bullshit argument.
Yeah.
And
well, it's an argument that gets huge ratings, making money for media, and gets politicians elected. But,
listen, some of the pundits who are anti-immigration have adopted children from other countries, and I won't name her, but she has 3 or 4 children, some of whom are brown and are old enough to read now. And I can't imagine what that conversation at home will be like. It was like, Mom, how come you don't like people from Latin America, but you adopted us from Guatemala?
Yeah, well, they sit home and throw rocks at themselves. That's what they do because they're so confused.
There's a cognitive dissonance there.
There really is it's a really important point. Man, it's so great talking to you. I blame you.
It's a pleasure. It's been a while, and I'm glad we got together again.
Yeah, I blame you entirely, as always.
You get in line, man.
It's great to see you. You're getting out. It seems you're traveling. You're moving about.
Yeah, I was in Houston the other day.
How is it out there?
It's busy, man. They need to bring airline capacity back. I happen to have gone to give a speech in Orlando right at the beginning of spring break. It was a 50-minute wait in Orlando to go through security. So the guy at Clear grabbed me because I was kind of running short on time, put me through in 5 minutes. But airports are packed. Restaurants in New York City, reasonably packed. we're not all the way back on services. Like, we're not going to the movies necessarily, unless it's a major blockbuster. We're getting there. But people do want to travel. So air traffic is up a lot, and people are really flying quite a bit.
So what you're saying is that they're still limiting ticket sales on airplanes, like keeping seats empty?
No, I mean, everything's booked full.
All right.
I don't think they brought all the airplanes.
Oh, the actual right.
Yeah, the physical capacity.
Oh, man, and depending on where you go, people are, I mean, you went to Florida. Florida never apparently changed its behavior at all. They had no pandemic there, it might seem, but...
Well, I guess there are things I can't say when I go there.
Yeah, well, I expect that you wouldn't say that. I also have always assumed that's why you went there, but I don't know about it.
Listen, I was in San Antonio. I had an interesting question from one of the members of the audience. Who's to blame for the pandemic and who's to blame for the war?
Oh, well, that's...
And I know where they wanted me to go with that. I know where the guy wanted me to go, right? He wanted me to say Biden. But both these events precede this particular president and even Trump. These things in a weird way,
Well, we've been conditioned to desperately, for the whatever dopamine hit, get the answer to the question of who, as opposed to the better question there for you especially, would be what?
Yeah, and why? I mean, the why is really important. And then, honestly, the most important is how do we solve it? And again, no constructive conversations around this because we're so hyperpolarized that we can't reach consensus. And that almost worries me as much as some of the splintering we're seeing among alliances and globalization.
Well, now I feel bad that I mostly asked you to identify kind of the root causes of problems, which I always love to do in conversation with you, and not enough about solutions. So let's block some time out for Ron Insana's solutions to all of what we face. Because
broader immigration reform.
Yeah.
H.R. McMaster brought this up on CNBC a couple of weeks ago. We traded during the period of globalization supply chain security for supply chain efficiency. So we're going to have to find ways to secure supply chains, and we will go from just-in-time inventories, which was a very big thing in business for a period of time, to just-in-case inventories. So we're going to see companies produce more than they need to just in case we have another event. Now, that may not happen, or it may happen, right? So it will change the architecture of business going forward. But I think those are reasonable solutions for the time being. The real things, obviously, that we need are still some meaningful education reform, comprehensive immigration reform. Obviously, we need to deal with the climate and all the things happening in that regard. But again, the latter of which has no simple solution, because we also need energy security at the same time. Yeah. And this transition from where we are now to be cleaner and greener probably requires more oil and gas. So
yeah, did you hear about
piss everybody off?
Did you hear about the proposal that I guess sounds pretty radical to use the Defense Production Act for government to create more electric heat pumps, which are super efficient, but maybe not as cost efficient, which is why we don't all have one yet. What do you think about things like that?
I think everything's. I'm in the everything and the all of the above camp. That we should try anything and everything, including nuclear power. By the way. Given the radical changes in nuclear technology over the years, we grew up in a period where there was 3 Mile Island, where there was Chernobyl, and where there was Fukushima. But some of the new plant designs are significantly safer. We still have the nuclear waste storage issue. But I do think when you look at the distribution of power generation, you have seen nuclear still hold at around 20%. You have natural gas at 20%. Obviously crude oil is a big deal. Coal's come down considerably, which is a good thing. But I think we really need an all of the above solution, and we should try anything at the moment that looks like it might, one, cut down on carbon emissions, and two, be more efficient than anything we have on hand at the moment.
Well, if Elon Musk is so smart, he'll create a carbon capturing machine, and then we can...
Yeah, assuming that works, right? I mean, we have some, I think there are some carbon capture skeptics out there that aren't sure that sequestration, as they like to call it, will work as planned.
Right.
And just shooting the stuff back into the ground. Yep. We'll see. Exxon's been at the forefront of this, British Petroleum's been at the forefront of this with Chevron. We'll see if it works. But, right now, emissions are back up. I mean, one of the beauties of the pandemic, if you could put it that way, was that our emissions fell dramatically, and we found out we could work from home, and so these types of technologies that you and I are using right now have become, extraordinarily important in our day-to-day lives. But even there, we have a debate is, do you do 2 days in the office? Do you do 3? Do you do 5? How much of this stuff do you use? Is it actually more efficient to use this stuff? Because we're still using a ton of electricity if we're using Zoom or any other medium over, phone line or
the question I just can't seem to figure out is do Christmas lights use as much energy as the inflatable lawn decorations? Because it would seem that because the inflatable lawn decorations are so awful and those people should all be removed by a homeowners association. But Agreed. I'm not. But if I'm being intellectually honest, I haven't found anything that said any data that says the inflatables take up more energy than lights, Ron. So
no, and there's a huge debate in my house. I like the big bulbs. My wife hates them.
Mm-hmm. On the tree, you mean? Like the big
on the tree? Yeah. And so having grown up in a lower middle class Sicilian American household, we did big bulbs and tinsel. This is not something that sells well with my wife. So. We even had the plastic icicles, so it's like she has this whole kind of design every year. It's 3 trees, 2 are fake, 1 is real. And there's a very conscious design effort that's undertaken for our Christmas layout.
Well, another sustainability issue, which are more sustainable, the fake tree or the real tree? There's some interesting debate on that as well. So
you should have seen the price of trees over the last 2 years. We saw one, not this last Christmas, but the one before that was $1,200. It was about 12 feet tall, but there's a shortage of trees because of the wildfires in the West.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Everything landscaping is expensive now too, but that's it. Yeah. I didn't realize that the specific kind of breed was yikes. Well, Ron, always great. I really appreciate
Put another log on. What the hell?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ron Insana, thank you very much.
Hey, great talking to you, Pete.
All right, there he goes, Ron Insana. I would love it. It would mean a lot to me if you would tweet him at @rinsana, @rinsana, and let him know that you heard him here on the show. Awesome conversation. I really enjoyed talking with him, and I'm going to try to get Barry Ritholtz on this week as well. So now moving on to a more human conversation with my good friend. Always great to catch up with her and kick off the week with her as well. And before I give her a quick intro, I do want to mention we talk about something that happened on Friday at my daughter's middle school. And I'm just going to read you what I posted on Facebook about this. A horrible act of ignorance and hatred at my daughter's middle school today. Today was the annual Day of Silence, which is meant to be a day of action to spread awareness about the effects of bullying and harassment of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning students. In the United States, students take a day-long vow of silence to symbolically represent the silencing of LGBTQ students. My daughter and several others did their best to support the cause wearing black and rainbow pins. Sadly, there was a contingent of kids, believe it or not, just crazy I just can't even believe this happened, wearing shirts saying on the shirts, straight marriage, and bullying the silent allies to speak and pass it around petitions affirming that they are straight. Now, you heard it right. That happened. And it means it was organized and premeditated. I think it's fair to assume. I don't want to misrepresent. My daughters did not experience any of the bullying. My older daughter, it was in high school. This wasn't in her school. But my daughter who was in the school where it took place, didn't see it and wasn't affected by it. But now, of course, she's heard about it. The students then taunted the kids wearing the pins, like I said, pulling on their backpacks, trying to get them to talk. And they asked them to sign a petition affirming that they are straight. I mean, so we're heartsick over learning this in our community. We're committed to do all we can to fight this hatred and ignorance. If you haven't organized with the others in your community, it's never too late to fight hate. That's what I posted on Facebook. And I spent Saturday morning about 9 to noon with the 2 board candidates that we're trying to get elected, who are awesome guys, Brian Montez and John Malpe, that live in my community. And we all were there talking about what had happened and what we're going to do about it. And that's what has to be done. Communities have to come together to protect students who are marginalized and bullied and work with the school as much as they possibly can. There will always be bullying, and then there will always have to be the helpers, the parents who try to understand and get to the root causes of where it comes from. So that's what I talked a little bit about, well, a lot about with Maura Quint on today's show. You know her on Twitter at Behind Your Back. She is a writer and an activist at AmericansForTaxFairness.org. That's the nonprofit that she works at. we had a little fun making fun of the billionaires that flew to space and how we discussed and debated the merits of being a billionaire, if it's possible to be a moral person and also accrue that much money. That was interesting. Parenting, bullying, and more at Behind Your Back. It's time for Maura Quint. There she is, Maura Quint, Maura Mondays. We missed you last week. I took the night off. I took the Sunday night off, but we missed you, and I'm glad to have you back. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I mean, I would imagine you spent the entire week just sort of feeling a tremendous sense of loss and longing and emptiness for my not having spoken to you.
Well, I ask
Are you okay?
I ask you like several questions every Sunday night, and you give great answers. And I heard this from a lot of people. We were all searching all week going, what would Maura have said about this dilemma? What joke?
I'm going to get some bracelets made up. WW.
That's right. MS, I think.
Yes, I don't know. That's going to get confusing.
Yeah, maybe we don't want bracelets with MS on it. What would multiple sclerosis? Okay, so anyway, I'm happy to see you, and I want to talk to you about this thing I told you about because I'm obsessing over it, and I think it's representative of a much larger, wider issue. But as I told people on Saturday, if they didn't listen to that show, there was an incident at my daughter's middle school that was just terrible on a really important day for gay and lesbian students, people, and their allies. And everybody already knows. I've read it to them. And you've read my post as well about what happened. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that kind of behavior from kids? Straight marriage, first of all, like with T-shirts, it's premeditated. They organized it.
Yeah, no, you got to get T-shirts made up. It's a whole thing. I mean, it's tricky for me. I've seen a lot of that. I grew up with a lot of that. It's not surprising. It's absolutely infuriating, though. I mean, it's just so frustrating to see, especially when it's younger people. And, you have this like hope that the next generation is getting better and that things are moving towards progress. And I fundamentally believe they are. And, even if you're like a polling obsessive person, the polls will say that they absolutely are, that younger people in general are more progressive than older people. And it continues onward. But it's still, it's really upsetting. I think when that happens, it sort of like brings a stark view of how many terrible adults are there, really.
Yeah. The school's not teaching that behavior. They're teaching acceptance of everybody in general. That's what schools at least pretend to do, right? But some schools. I would imagine that's not being taught in my daughter's middle school and by any adults. But so you just have to imagine where those 8th graders, 7th graders, where do they come up with such ideas? It has to be at home, right? I mean, is it too much of an assumption?
No, it's coming from someone's home. I mean, I think it is unlikely you have a lot of liberal families whose kids are just like really knee-jerk reactionary right-wingers for some reason. Although I'm sure that could happen just via peer pressure if your kid falls into the wrong crowd, which frankly I'm terrified of.
You mean liberal parents usually have, liberal-minded kids is what you're saying?
Generally, to some extent, yeah. But I think it is unnerving. When I was working at the polls, I want to say this was 2020 election, and I was sitting outside because I was working for the local Democratic Party, just like as a greeter with, information for anyone who wanted it. There was a group of like, I don't know, they looked like they were about 13-year-olds or so, just biking back and forth in front with Trump flags and MAGA flags and like, just shouting obnoxious shit. Like it was so much worse than when it was just an adult. It was just so much more heartbreaking to see, even though there's hope for those kids. they could grow out of their parents' shit.
Yeah, I think that's important that we don't like demonize the kids. I want to say too much. I mean, there has to be a certain, I feel like, standard set, but that's different. Like you cannot know what Trump stands for. I feel like this is to have a specific anti or reaction in this case, being for straight marriage and doing it on this day, which is dedicated to commemorate or, appreciate LGBT folks. It just seems so brutal.
Well, the kids are very much, they're on topic. Really, it's a tremendous, impressive display of coordination on the right because, this is their thing now. They're all about let's overturn the marriage equality. Let's make it only for men and women again. This is, let's get rid of abortion. Let's penalize anyone for not being straight, basically.
Yeah.
They're on a real intense march right now. So, hey, impressive top-down messaging. Those kids are right on board.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, the culture war issues are alive. It's just so depressing and disappointing to think about that we're having a fight about marriage equality again. I don't want to have that argument anymore. I want to have any other one but that one. It's just tough.
I want trans men to be able to get an abortion on their wedding day to another man. I want all of these things to be just a normal, accepted thing. It's really, really frustrating to go back through this fight. That said, you saw this, right? When you were in school?
I didn't.
There was,
anti-gay stuff.
Yeah.
I wasn't very sensitive to it. We were all saying the F word. We didn't have any student who was out at all. And so, but you made fun of kids who are more feminine. I don't think I did. I really don't. And that's because my older brother was bullied so mercilessly. It was such a small school. I kind of could sense when kids were, being marginalized and try to be their friend, frankly. But it wasn't that. But if it was, I'm sure, and I've heard from some of those kids who are openly gay now that were in our class that they felt horrible. So, yeah.
Well, right. I was going to say simply the fact that you didn't have any kids who were out is enough to point that it was not a
for sure
place for
no doubt about it.
A gay student. And it was very much the same for me as well. I would say the same thing. It's not as though I saw active bullying of anyone who was LGBTQ, but I also didn't see anyone who was LGBTQ. And, you got to college and you started hearing, oh, so-and-so is gay. Oh, gosh, I didn't know, but they were not in a situation where they could say that comfortably when they were in high school. I do think we should recognize that we have come much further in all of these things. There are kids in my children's elementary school, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade that are, I have no idea what their gender, what they will determine it to be, but they are certainly kids who feel pretty comfortable presenting themselves in non-traditional gender conforming ways at the ages of 8 or 9. And the other kids seem fine with that. And that's massive. That's huge to see.
I feel like that's hard. That's a newer thing, certainly for our generation of parents to deal with. And it's connected to the gay issue, but it's not the gay issue. And it seems like let's learn and discuss about all the gender related stuff that we're hearing and experiencing, but we don't need to go back to the issue of same gender love. That we don't need to discuss. And when we had that discussion, that's done. The transgender issue, let's be fair to everybody that we all need time to figure this out. But that's different. It's separate. But it seems it's not being separated in the arguments, it would seem, or the tactics and politics. It's all connected.
I don't think acceptance and inclusion is separate. I think it's pretty much a singular issue. There may be nuances or particular questions that people might have, but I think generally speaking, it's all pretty much the same issue. And I think that, we have continued so solidly forward that we get these really intense knee-jerk reactionary moments where people go really, really hard and want to fight even more. It's a lot easier to kind of ignore if you can ignore it, right? It's kind of easier to say, well, I don't really care who's marrying who if you can kind of not have to see it. But the more it becomes just completely accepted in society, the more there comes this kickback reactionary element. And of course, as we've discussed before, the right is really very well coordinated in churning out these messages and really doubling down. Because, you look at something like abortion for that matter, but also like gay marriage. I mean, these things are popular. They have the general population is in favor of these things.
Public approval and polling. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but the right doesn't care. They're not doing it thinking either that they're going to win any votes, but they also aren't worried about losing any.
Well, I think that when you start talking about the politics of it, and I talk with so many, I always read all the con law people, and I interview Eric Siegel all the time, and it's like, yeah, it's not popular, but they've got the Supreme Court, so they can actually overturn so many things.
Oh yeah,
even with such a minority. Not to mention just democracy dwindling in general. But if you just look at the Supreme Court, it's not popular, but they can do it. Because they have the power and obviously the enthusiasm and motivation for it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, it's very frightening. I'm not trying to minimize the risk here or the concern that there should be. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm just saying that I think they're going to basically even try even harder, being that they are in a sort of opinion minority. But it's very, very upsetting to see. And I mean, it's so much worse, I think, in the way that you had to experience it when it's something that your child is directly.
Yeah. To be fair, I've been getting a lot of people, I posted that on Facebook, and people are like, so sorry for your daughter, or they're so brave or whatever. But my daughters weren't, I just want to say publicly, they haven't been affected by this. They weren't targeted. They didn't see it. It happened at their school. I might have been more clear. They don't identify. They identify as they love boys. It seems a lot, mostly. Maybe a little girl once in a while, but I don't. They don't. It's not an issue that they feel marginalized by. I don't think, but they're obviously sensitive to it. And Julia was, wearing a pin, but she was like, I want to stand with anybody LGBT, but I also want to talk because I like to talk. So you're supposed to be silent. But, so it's how dedicated are you really? But they didn't see it happen and whatever. But do you think it is almost always or exclusively connected to religion, these views?
Well, what does that mean? Because no, for the most part, it's not connected to religion.
People who are anti-gay are, I feel almost always religious, at least a bit.
Again, I would ask sort of what does that mean to be religious? Are these people who make
a religious argument,
being pro-God as part of their identity? Yes. Are they religious? Do they actually adhere to religious texts? No, they don't.
No, I'm saying, put it this way, let me try to be even more specific. Those who argue against marriage equality argue from a standpoint, from a religious argument, that it's not part of their religion. That's why they don't approve of it. I mean, those are the arguments being made on our Facebook page, in fact. My son doesn't, our religion doesn't approve of this. Right. And you're discriminated against my son is the argument, so that's, I'm trying to be as specific as I can about the arguments being made and where they're founded in.
Yeah, I mean, I think religion gets used for that pretty regularly, but I think that there's also just I think there's a whole sort of conservative traditionalist sect that, they might throw out religion as some sort of a cover, but I don't think they actually believe it or care. I think they just see that as a bulletproof vest, right? It's a way for them to claim a minority status, which they're not, but they'll still claim it because they'll claim that, Christians are persecuted.
Sure. So
that's a great identity that they can slap on and, and then try and hide. And then, also the freedom of religion is something that is sort of a protected class, right? So they can use that fully to just wrap themselves up in and say, you can't come at me. This is why I'm able to fire at you, but you can't fire back.
So archaic still, nonetheless, to make such.
Oh, it's infuriating. It's absolutely infuriating. And it makes me crazy.
Just me too. What about bullying in general? I wanted to just talk to you about that because I'm thinking a lot about bullying in terms of for the show and for our school, trying to find out, how it's handled. And because a lot of parents are talking about that it's gotten really bad. And I think that it's just your perspective. I think it wasn't really bad in elementary school because kids weren't as bad. But yeah, it's always bad in middle school. And it gets better in high school to some extent. But if you're experiencing bullying, your kid is in middle school, that's always been there. And the question is, how is it handled by the school? And I think the better question is, and this is what I want to ask, if your kid is a bully and you were told that by the guidance counselor, the principal, or whatever, how do you handle that? Because I always, again, have a default thing here where that's a home thing usually. That a school has a hard time repairing or changing a kid's whatever roots I think cause them to be a bully. That really is something usually often that's happening at home, or where home needs to be, working on it, I guess. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's really, I think the whole world of bullying is in fact a world, and it's really tricky. And I think there are a lot of moving pieces to it. You're absolutely right. It's always been there. This is not something new. I have no way to know if it's gotten any worse. I would think it hasn't, except that a bully's access to their victims has certainly
that's a great
increased.
Great point.
And so, if kids can't really go home and hide from it like we used to be able to do, you used to be able to go home and you were safe, right? You just didn't answer the phone or something, but you could take some hours until the next day to figure it out and to sort of deal with your own emotional state. Whereas, to the extent that any child can, but now so many kids are just plugged in 24/7. And there feels like there's absolutely no escape. And even to be able to put the social media or the screen down in some way, just the awareness that it is building in a way that you will see when you look back at it. It doesn't provide any real respite or ability to kind of avoid it. So I do think in that way, yes, it's probably gotten worse. But, we also are a bit more attuned to it. And so I hope that in some ways it has gotten a bit better. I mean, I don't know, when we were in school, even, I think that teachers didn't care at all. It's not like there was any structure in place in any of my schools to deal with bullying. It was just kind of shut up.
We had a sign up in the chemistry class. I remember it said, don't lower others to raise yourself. And that always resonated with me, and it never changed the way I put kids down.
You sure that wasn't just chems? Nice. Sorry, I got that. I stepped on your joke. It was very good. Only because I was working on my own.
It happens. It happens all the time with funny people.
I was going to go with solutions and percentage. I was going to make a chemistry thing.
I think what you're saying is a really important point. Two important points. In some ways, bullying has gotten worse because you can't find sanctuary from it because of social media and constant connectedness. But in some ways, it's gotten better in terms of we have developed resources and entire probably schools within education schools, policies, psychology, social and emotional learning, mindfulness. We've just got, in-school counselors and so much more to deal with it. But I'm not saying they cancel each other out, but it's still something I feel like, getting back to the root, it's something at home. It's hard for a school to remedy things that are causing a child to be that way.
Right. So I think that's right. I mean, I think a lot of it does potentially come from home, but not all of it. And I think the problem, of course, is if it's coming from the home life and it's a child who this is what they have learned is, a way to deal with things. For any number of reasons, because their home is reinforcing that this is how you treat people, or they have no outlet for the sort of way that they're being treated at home, or those types of things. It's very hard to intervene because potentially you most likely have a family situation that is not open to trying to figure this out.
Right.
But I do think that there are also places where there are families that are, that can be approached and that are willing to try some things and that sort of inadvertently have a bully on their hands for a couple of, there are reasons too. Kids can go that route because of social pressures and of, wanting to fit in or things like that, that maybe aren't coming directly from, like, I think we have this idea, right? Like the kid gets bullied by the parents and then goes to school and bullies a classmate.
Right.
And yeah, that definitely happens. But I don't think that's the only route to bullying. I think there are other ways that it can go as well. You also can just have like kids who are upset or angry for other reasons that no one has really identified yet. There are kids who maybe are struggling with some sort of emotional or learning disorder or something else, but that hasn't been really called out or identified, and they don't know what to do with that frustration. And so it gets turned outward to others. There's a lot of routes, and unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to like eradicate bullying. But I think one of the things that I certainly try to do, and I hope that this is like, to me, it's like, this is the best route I've got, is talk to my kids about it a lot. And because at this point in time, my eldest in particular, for the most part, doesn't seem likely to become a victim of bullying, nor to be a bully yet. So the route that I go with him most of the time is to really try and talk about, how are other kids being treated? Are you seeing kids being treated in a way that's not okay? Are they, and like talking through how kids might feel. And, like he's in 5th grade. They start to form lots of different like social awareness and interaction, and there are kids he likes and kids he doesn't like. And when he doesn't like a kid, like I try to talk to him a lot about why, about, what is it that he doesn't like, and, and talk through why that kid might be behaving that way, or, or how is that kid being treated by others? And does that kid have friends? Like, or is it a kid who's been really ostracized, or, that just try and like really constantly raise awareness of other people and what their circumstances might be and why that might bring people to behave certain ways, which, it's not easy for us as adults. So it's certainly not easy for kids.
I think that is the best thing you can do, what you're doing. But I think that parents who have the time and the kind of resources and the background, the education, the understanding of it, know how to do it. And the way to generally do it is, I found, because I did it wrong for a while, still do sometimes, is to not force it, but to find the opportunity to talk about what your moral values are and what kind of behaviors are appropriate. And that only comes up when you have a conversation with your kid and you're like, hey, you got to ask something specifically, of course, because you can't just be like, how was your day today? I quickly found out. They're like, good. You have to say, I still do it with both the girls. I'm like, well, did you get any laughs today? Any big laughs? Like, what was the biggest laugh? And that's a really interesting one. Or
that's a great question.
Yeah. And now it's become, did you get any laughs? Because both of them, are clowns to a certain extent when given the opportunity. But the other, all other kinds of questions, specific questions, any, rose and thorn type stuff you talk about when they're younger. But that's hard. I think that's hard for probably most parents don't do what we're talking about doing. They try their best, but for whatever reasons, they have a hard time connecting, communicating, getting the opportunity, create the space to have the conversation about appropriate behavior, moral values. And even then, they might not have the vocabulary to articulate it. So I'm trying to be really compassionate for those parents whose kids are assholes.
I'm sure they appreciate it. I'm sure they really do. No, it's hard. That's the thing that's, again, it's just ridiculous. Being a parent is ridiculous because you're trying to create these perfect little humans, right? You want them to be this great version of a person, whatever that means. And you're trying to do all of that when none of us have figured out our own shit at all. No one has kids and it's just yes, I have achieved enlightenment. Now I shall pass this on. That doesn't happen. Yeah. It's all people who are just in complete chaos because, we have kids at this certain section of our life. I don't know. Maybe if we could have kids when we were 60 or 70, maybe there's a better chance for it. But it's not. It's just we're drowning in our own personal ridiculous elements. And then we're supposed to carve a way out of that to communicate perfectly all of the lessons that a person needs to know. It's nonsense. There's no way. And so I'm not surprised. Of course, no one can perfectly do it. And of course, so many parents struggle to be able to communicate anything to their kids. And then, like, you know, kids suck too. They're just
they certainly can. They certainly can.
Like even the best kids, like what you were just talking about, you know, you try and like connect and like, how was your day? I don't think a kid on the planet has ever said anything other than fine. That's like the only
well,
response.
Actually, Mother, you'll never believe what happened today.
I have the most amusing tale for you.
There I was.
Standing at the bus stop, as I'm wont to do. No,
and I had realized.
Yeah, we're going to go for like an hour.
I had forgotten my thermos.
Yeah, no, they never share anything. It's like a constant struggle. And I think that's also, too, why, like, I think parents can have kids that are bullying and not know it because they're not hearing these things. So I do appreciate that in a lot of cases, there is more of a communication between the school and at least attempting to reach out to parents. Because I mean, I've certainly spoken with other parents who did not know that their child was being mean to someone. And
I think that's a hard thing for a parent to do almost ever, but it shouldn't be a hard thing for the school principal or guidance counselor to do. You know, you don't want to, it's hard to go to another parent and be like, your kid is being such a dick, because that almost never goes well and you're interfering. And now the kids might have an issue that they didn't need. I mean, you know, but the school, that's different. Something happens in school, you know, you're not trying to be friends with the parents, hopefully. You're like, no, is that right? You're having some,
I think that schools do have to placate parents in a lot of ways. Like there's a lot of, it's not easy. Schools are not in a good circumstance.
It's hard
or situation.
You're not wrong. Yeah, I don't mean to minimize the difficulties that all of the adults in any school have dealing with and communicating with the parents and the community. So, not good point. So the other big, like, I want to ask you a political question and how you handle this argument we're going to continue to hear be brought up, and I think it's kind of interesting just to kind of put to bed. You're hearing a lot of, quote, mainstream Republican leadership types from Mitch McConnell to Chris Christie. And I'm talking to now what are, I guess, called moderates because they live on, to some extent, Earth One. But they're still extremists in my mind. Nonetheless, they're asked, if President Trump were to run again, would you be able to vote? You know, would you vote for him? And like, if he's the leader of the Republican Party, if they nominate him, yes. And the argument that they always generally say is, I can't vote for some socialist or a Bernie Sanders, or that would be terrible. And I was thinking about this today, and I guess my answer, I want to obviously get yours, is pretty simple. It's like, so you're saying you're more worried about certain tenets of socialism than you are democracy and having this dangerous, horrible person. And the answer they're giving is, yeah, like Bernie Sanders would be worse than Donald Trump. I mean, what do you say? What's your just response or argument to anybody who might say Trump is better than the most progressive or a Democrat even?
I will be very honest. For the most part, the moment someone is saying that to me, I'm not engaging the conversation, because that's someone who's already made up their mind. No, really, like if someone is already, if they're coming from a place of Donald Trump is better than whatever, at this point, it's just like, that's just someone who, what's happening there is they like Donald Trump. They just feel like maybe they're not supposed to. But like, that's all it is. And I mean, that's the only thing I would really say is like, oh, you're a little embarrassed that you're a Trump fan, huh? Like, that's the best I could do, because that's it. Like, otherwise, this is not a person who wants to hear points. They would love, I think generally, they would love to engage in like a debate with you and like explain why socialism is scary, because that way they can reinforce the fact that they're not doing anything really wrong. They have to like Trump. Like that's a win for them, because they get to like feel a little better in their head. So for me, I just like to sort of not let them feel better.
I want to have that. I hear you. But I actually want to have that. I want to hear somebody make that argument, like, you know, a listener, someone that is more worried about, I don't know, because I'm just not worried about universal health care or my taxes going up. I was talking to somebody yesterday that lives in my town, a retired NYPD police officer, and he was talking about he's got to move because the taxes are just too high. And I dropped my daughter off at his house one time, and I was just like, "You're complaining about the taxes? You have a it seems like you have it all, but some people will never be satisfied, and they're always worried about taxes, and so they want to move to whatever places that don't have them. But other than that, I mean, I can't imagine what they're scared of. I can't. But anyway,
South Dakota needs people.
There you go. But final political question is: how concerned? Do you think it's overplayed that you're hearing a lot of people say that they're now the mainstream of the Republican base, at least, is going to buy into and start spreading the idea that Democrats are pedophiles and groomers? Do you think do you think that stays on the fringe, or do our Republican friends that we know, that we work with, that we're even somewhat respectful of at this point, are going to start calling people pedophiles?
Yeah, they're definitely going to do it because that's how the Republican. No, like they're of course they're going to do it. Look, let me just say, I had a meeting last week. I volunteer with Working Families Party in Pennsylvania to vet local candidates to make recommendations on who Working Families Party should endorse as like a lower level race candidate here where I live. And so there's a new woman who is working for Working Families Party. And so she came out and we had coffee together and we were talking, and she asked me, would you ever consider running for one of these offices? And I was like, look, I think about it. I've considered it lots of times, but I think that ultimately I wouldn't want to do that unless there was really no one else to step in, because I think I'm a liability, because I don't know how to not say.
Yeah, I feel the same. I'm the same way. Yeah.
All Republicans are terrible. At this point, all Republicans are terrible. They're just the worst fucking people. And so, like, yeah, of course your fucking Republican coworker is going to be calling someone a pedophile. Because they don't give a shit. Like, they just don't. And at this point, I don't know anyone who is. I know people who have values that align more with what a traditional Republican Party sort of used to be, especially from like an economic standpoint. And I know people who take those types of perspectives, but for the most part, most of them don't call themselves Republican anymore.
Right.
Right. The Republican Party now is the Donald Trump party. And yes, of course, all of those people will have no problem calling someone a pedophile.
Okay. Well, I'm going to keep asking that question and trying to figure out if others don't feel that way. It's really not. It's a nuts thing. I mean, I think you're right, but it's just that seems to cross the Rubicon a little bit further than even like calling someone racist or sexist things. Like calling someone a pedophile is.
Elon Musk was calling someone a pedophile because he didn't like them.
I think he called someone a pedophile that was like one of the people that like saved the kids from that cave in was it Thailand?
Yes, it's like it's not a big deal for them. They have no problem weaponizing words and concepts as like but I also think that's going to pass in like however many months until it gets replaced with the next thing that they decide to just completely
of course,
destroy the meaning of and use as a weapon.
We forgot. I got called a pedophile for a week by 800,000 people, and many of which you volunteered to block on my Twitter feed.
Yeah, and all of that was just coordinated. Like this is the line of attack that we're using because anyone who is not a Trump fan is evil, and we're going to take them down however we can.
Right. That's fair. That seems like a fair tactic. Thank you for playing with such fairness.
I get it. I used to live in a world of gray a lot more than I do now, actually.
Oh, really? What do you mean?
Yeah. I mean, I used to always be sort of equivocating and always being like, well, you never know. And people are going through a lot and like, they're not all bad. And like, I really was always just finding the decency and the good and like living in this space where nothing was ever truly like bad. Everything was kind of, and I still do that internally, but I've become a lot more forcefully black and white because I have come to the point of recognizing like, I've gotten to a place of, there was a difference in Germany between the Nazis who wanted to kill the Jews and someone who just they aligned with the Nazi Party because they believe in the German people, and it was very nationalistic. And they liked that the different economic policies that were being put forth, and they cared very much about neighborhood and children's safety, and they liked that there was a lot of attention to community happening, and what we call those people is Nazis. Like, that's where I've come to. It's just like, it doesn't matter. I don't care anymore what the gray is. Like, there can be some clear good and clear bad. And I try and I'm not even comfortable there, but I do try and spend more time in that space of being able to say, you know what? I don't care what the gray is. The outcome is, this is bad.
Finally, I love all of what you just said. I just wanted to ask you one more thing. It's sometimes hard in conversation, especially with you, where I want to keep going and respond or go down that line. But I also have a bit of an agenda of like, I just want your take on these several things too. So, but it's always tough with you because I want to keep talking. But also we have lives. So I just
what's this we shit, Pete? Don't put having a life on me. Come on.
I thought you had things.
You're ruining my brand here.
What is your brand is that you have nothing going on?
Absolutely nothing. Sad
Not true.
And alone, and I just wait in my like little hidey hole every week for you to call me, basically. That's why I have so much to say.
You're just frozen, not moving, waiting for the call.
That's it.
I love this. What is this? I'm looking at your Twitter feed. This is a great thing promoting something that you did. Act TV, right. Tax the Rich with Maura Quint. I'm going to steal that.
Oh, okay.
I think I have a different picture that I use to promote your appearances. I like this one.
Oh, I don't know which one it is.
Anyway.
Can't wait to see. I'm terrified.
Did you hear that a bunch of billionaires went in? They're on the space station?
No, I didn't hear that. Oh, that's so fun for them. Can they stay there?
They're going to stay there for the week.
I think that they should make that a permanent vacation.
I think this is... I didn't know this. I thought those rocket ships were just going like higher than you could go on a plane for like a couple minutes. But this, I was surprised to hear this, that SpaceX 4-person crew went all the way to the space station, docking with it, the first time private citizens have ever visited it. And they're going to stay there for the week. And they paid $55 million a piece for the flight. So what's the most you've ever paid for a flight? And
I mean, it was right around there. Right around like Christmas time. That's about what they cost. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So a private company flew to space, profited off of it because the individuals paid, Elon Musk or Tesla or whatever. And then they are now using the public resources of the government program. Cool. Just for free. That makes sense.
That should have to be factored in. That's a great point. While they're on the space station, they should have to pay all the governments that are who is it? The Russians and the American, I don't know, funds the space station or how it's funded. But you're
it's okay. By the end of the week, they'll say they invented the space station.
They're creating jobs up there.
They literally, right. The money will slowly trickle down to Earth. Don't worry.
They're there and they're being taken care of by the actual astronauts and cosmonauts that are deserved to be there, the scientists and stuff. And they're creating jobs. They're job creators on the space station. They're like, please come over here and bring me my coffee, Commander Jackson.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I will tip you in a little bit more oxygen so you can breathe.
Bring my oxygen, Commander. My monocle is floating away. That's crazy. $55 million.
But it's nothing. What's really crazy is $55 million is nothing to them. Nothing.
American real estate investor, Canadian businessman, and a former Israeli fighter pilot. I don't know how he got his money, but
I don't want to know. I'm sure it's not good.
You just assume it's not good when people have that much money that they accrued it in any kind of ethical way. There
is no way to accrue that much money in an ethical way.
Why?
There's not.
Why? What if Well, I'll give you a what if I invented a vaccine and it saved all the lives of everybody.
You did it all by yourself with absolutely
I
no
know. I have
funding
like
and no...
2 other scientists in my lab.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I have the resources of the university.
How are you making money off of it?
Well,
you're telling me you're charging tremendous rates for every time anybody uses it? And
no, not tremendous rates. Just, but I mean, everybody needs this. I mean, whatever these vaccines, cost to make. I don't know. Vaccine is my go-to, but I can't think of too many other things that somebody would argue in any ethical way that you could make $1 billion, much less,
Yeah, but none of the scientists who make vaccines are billionaires. The
pharmaceutical
heads
companies.
of the pharmaceutical companies they are more likely to be, but the actual scientists aren't.
Scientists themselves, but still, yeah.
Yeah, no, but you're not in that place. You're not making that sort of money, and if you are, you're doing it through unethical means. There's not an ethical way. I will take that challenge.
What if
there's not? Yeah,
you're growing all the food for for the world. You invented a seed that was a sustainable seed that could grow corn right through climate change.
Okay, Pete, first of all, I absolutely love that you think that inventors are like, oh no, they made something and now they're very, very rich off of it, as opposed to people who made something and never see a fucking penny from it because it gets totally
Mike
taken
Lindell with his pillow. He made that.
Did he make it? That would make sense because everyone I know has said it's just the worst pillow they've ever.
It's horrible. I had one because I did a live read for it 10 years ago in Sirius, and it's a bag of onions. Weird.
So there's someone, there's a whole convoluted situation where someone ended up with a bunch of them and gave them to someone else I knew who found it so terrible they gave it to their dog, and the dog I've watched this dog now. The dog tries to destroy it. Yeah. Even the dog does not like this pillow.
That's because the pillow is actually made of cats.
Well, that would be attractive to a dog, no? Nice try.
I wasn't sure how that was going to... Oh, well, listen, I appreciate the exercise in futility that I just attempted against you, of all people. I mean, I don't obviously believe any of that. I think it's insane, and I think it's evil to accrue that kind of money. And
look, I'm excited for this because over time, I really want you to find a way that it is morally...
Reach out to Maura on Twitter. What is the moral way to make millions of dollars? At
billions. We're billions.
Oh, you want to say billions?
Yeah, we're going to. I'm talking about being a billionaire.
Okay, what is the moral way to make $1 billion at Behind Your Back? And I'm also going to, maybe I'll just start a whole fight on social media about this because I do want to hear. I want to hear you could take them, each one of them, so quickly. Bing, 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 bing. It'll be good. I'm there for it.
I did say I had no life. I really set myself up.
Get
for
ready.
That, didn't I?
Oh, God, it's about to heat up.
God damn it. I'm going to get a life so fast.
Thank you very much for talking to me. I always appreciate it, and we missed you last week.
Thank you, Pete.
Okay, there she goes, Maura Quint at Behind Your Back, Americans for Tax Fairness. Everybody, check them out as well. And let Maura know you appreciate when she joins the conversation, which is pretty much every Monday. Always love catching up with her, getting her perspective on all things about life and the world and how it works. And I always want to hear from you. Send me an email, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Hope to see you at the Thursday night hangout. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing out. Come join us, standupwithpete.com. standupwithpete.com or patreon.com/standup. I use the Patreon subscription service. It's as little as $5 and you are a member, and you can always edit your pledge upwards. Maybe you listen a lot. You think you should pay a little bit more if you can, whatever you can. I appreciate it. Keeps the shed lights on, and this song keeps me dancing. It's John Carroll with Stand Up. Talk to you tomorrow. Be the change you want to see in the world, folks.
They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence, and even start making sense and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw the land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.